Thank you very much. We would like to express our gratitude for inviting us here. It's an honor for us. And before we start talking about the nature of Russian propaganda, let's watch the video which we created specifically for this research and which we usually call like emotional illustration to research. Okay, let's start. So this.
Американцы вместе с европейцами в течение ряда лет неуклонно ломали действующие международные правила под себя, полагая, что мир будет просто тихо и спокойно во все это встраивается.
Эксперты говорят, американцы вновь создают угрозу мировой безопасности и хотят решать свои проблемы за чужой счет.
Мы находимся в состоянии информационной войны, я бы сказал так, с законодательными информационного поля мирового. Прежде всего, это, наверное, англосаксы.
НАТО торжествует, альянс наступает по всем направлениям. Он продолжает размещать военную технику все ближе к границам России.
Весь мир в заложниках у Америки, у ее сверхидеи, главенствует над этой планетой.
Военный комитет НАТО утвердил создание международных батальонных тактических групп в странах Балтии и в Польше. Это значит, к границам России скоро стянут дополнительный крупный воинский контингент.
Они развязали эту войну, они развязали эту гонку вооружений. И мы, к сожалению, не можем ждать от них никаких добрых поступков.
Это банкнота в $1, почему-то напичканная масонскими символами. Здесь и пирамида, и всевидящее око. От этого ока никто не скроется, даже в самом удаленном уголке мира. Если что-то будет складываться не так, если силы этой бумажки окажется недостаточно, прилетят самолеты с бомбой. Вот несложная логика доминирования, логика гегемона.
Вездесущие штаты, готовые развязать войну где угодно, лишь бы был удобный для них повод, на самом деле бряцают ржавыми доспехами.
Они будут делать с Россией. Все, что они будут делать сейчас, это использовать сетки для того, чтобы взорвать Россию изнутри по такому же принципу, как они до этого взрывали Восток. И не надо быть наивными и считать, что они сейчас начнут атаковать наши границы. Нет, они боятся нашей армии.
Что для нас Соединенные Штаты? Это враг. По факту, последние десятилетия именно от них исходила угроза. Это радость по поводу развала Советского Союза, желание превратить великую страну в ничто.
Высокие специалисты, аналитики ЦРУ, это террористическая организация, еще раз напоминаю. Эти террористы, значит, пособничали с террористами ИГИЛ, они против нас проводили террористические акты в Сирии, против наших военных.
Вице-президент США Джо Байден официально объявляет России кибервойну. Америка начинает войну торговую. Америка объявляет Китаю войну торговую. Америка рвет договор по самому опасному классу ракет. Американцы теперь будут развозить на самолетах ядерные бомбы по всей планете. Трудно отвязаться от подозрений, что американцы на практике ведут дело на европейском континенте к войне. Пусть чужими руками, но к войне. США действуют безответственно, разрушая страны и уклад целых регионов, что ведет к смерти сотен тысяч людей и многим миллионам беженцев.
Соединенные Штаты пытаются нагнетать военную обстановку на границах России, пытается создать и укрепить видимость угрозы российской Европе, европейским странам и тем самым усилить враждебность этих стран к России.
Америка вступила в стадию неолиберального фашизма.
Одно дело, когда у вас есть крупнейшее террористическое государство в истории, Соединенные Штаты Америки, с крупнейшей в истории террористической организацией НАТО. А другое дело, когда они вправду больные и сумасшедшие.
Когда это русские хотели с кем-то воевать? Всегда к нам лезли.
Нас никто не слушал. Послушайте сейчас. Спасибо.
So, hello. We suggest to put emotions aside and try to analyze Russian informational public domain in figures and in as more measurable indexes as possible. But first of all, let's look at an ongoing poll by Levada Center. This is one of the probably most and the only trusted independent agency in Russia, how Russians define who is their enemy. As you can see, the United States is by far number one. Ukraine is number two, of course. But also what is interesting is two cases here which are marked with red circle. It is Georgia and Turkey. And you can see how fast public opinion can be shaped by media. And so in our work, we try to analyze the influence of media on a Russian domestic audience. What we have done in our research, we have taken all news on 3 top TV channels and on 10 popular websites for the last 3.5 years. So all news and political talk shows. And we are analyzing, making content analysis of all which is said in this news about European countries, the United States and Ukraine. So we are categorizing this information first into positive and negative news, and then we take all negative news, which is thousands and thousands of mentions, and they are all verified by humans in order to check whether it is really negative, and then to categorize it into topic and subtopic. And that's how we can say on figures, on big amount of figures about narratives. So all information you would see later further in this presentation is based on this huge amount of negative news. It's more than 30,000 news. Let's have a look at Russian media landscape. So first of all, TV is by far the most important source of information in Russia, and online media is significantly behind. But what is more important, that Russians not only prefer this source of news, they also trust to federal TV. It is the most trusted source of news in Russia, and the less trusted is foreign media. Which can be explained that few Russians, about only 10%, speak any foreign language, which is English, the most popular, and also few of them are traveling abroad. So as for the year 2016, only 7% of Russians traveled outside of the territory of former USSR. An average Russian citizen watches TV 4.5 hours per day, and this figure is more for more senior people and less for younger people. So here is a TV landscape of Russia, and in this research we are analyzing the first top 3 channels, Channel 1, Russia 1 and NTV. By the way, all that you have seen in that video, it's all from big mainstream channels, and all these people, they're really important and famous people in Russia. These three channels can reach 76% of the whole Russian audience during 1 week, so they're really powerful channels of communication. So of course, because they're so important, they are all owned or controlled by Russian government. So here you can see the most popular TV channels and TV groups in Russia, and with yes, they're marked all channels that have news in their grid, and they are all owned by the government. It's either directly by government or through Putin's close allies like Mr. Kovalchuk, who is under US and European sanctions from the first day. So, conclusions on media landscape. TV is the most influential media in Russia. These three channels, which we're analyzing further in this research, they're reaching 76% of the whole audience, domestic audience of Russia during 1 week. And Russians trust to TV, and they do not trust to any foreign media. And all of them are, of course, owned, this media, by the Kremlin. So what we see there is actually a position of the Kremlin. You could never hear anything or see on these channels which Kremlin would not approve. The first fact, just to give you impression how massive it is. So European countries and US are mentioned negatively 25 times per day only on these three channels. It is excluding Ukraine. If we add Ukraine, this figure would be much more. 25 times per day. It's a huge figure just to compare with Coca-Cola brand, which is top-of-mind brand, of course. It had only 6 times advertising on these channels. According to this TV news, the main targets of criticism are the United States, Ukraine, and European countries. If we compare share of ratio of negative to positive news, we can see that it is almost all negative. And the most negative ratio is for the United States. If we look in more details into Europe, country by country, we see a very interesting finding here, that though the average rate is 85 in favor of negative news, there are some countries, very few, 2 countries actually, which are very positive according to Russian media. And these countries are Switzerland and Belarus. So according to this, to Russian TV, to Russian media, life in this country is much better, much more positive than in all other countries of Europe. What it says to us is that Kremlin, or these channels, they can portray any country as they would like. We also have looked at content analysis of some words on channels and on websites, and we see that that the word war is the most popular word among all other, with significant difference. Here we're coming to top narratives about Europe, Ukraine, and US, and we will talk about them in more details.
So we have this threat narrative, and after analyzing 3 years of content on Russian TV, we concluded that narrative is the main structural element of Russian propaganda. And it's not easy to defeat narratives. It's not fake news, which you can easily expose. Narratives are based on people's convictions and beliefs, and it must be very massively broadcasted what Russian media do. So, according to recent survey Leisure Pursuit conducted by Russian Levada Center, the main source of pleasure for Russians is watching TV. 30. Oh, I'm sorry. 34% of Russian citizens chose this kind of pastime, among others like having sex or having good meal or or spending time with children. Here we have top narratives about Europe on Russian TV. First one is horrors of life. We call it like this because it's based on technological disasters, natural catastrophes, crimes, and so on. The main message here that wherever you go in Europe, it is dangerous and you will face danger and insecurity. So the next narrative is decay in Europe. 70% of this narrative is based on the fact that European Union is some artificial formation, it doesn't have true basis, and these countries don't want to be in one union together. Also, they're speaking about moral values, like decaying moral values. And this wording, decay in Europe, we took, it was born in Soviet era. It's not accidental. They used to talk about Europe as decaying West. Protests, third narrative. According to Russian media, Europe is full of protests. And it shows that people are not happy with government, with their governments. They talk about protests of janitors, of workers of Eiffel Tower, for example. Everybody is going to street to show dissatisfaction. And if in democratic world protests are it's like a feature of democratic society, when people can go and use this tool to show that something is wrong and have this dialogue with government. In Russia, it means that people are not happy with the system. Then terrorism. Of course, they talk mostly about real terrorist attacks, but how they present them, as people tragedy or more as a kind of payment for this kind of life. And very often, as in first narrative, Horrors of Life, they show authorities, security services as weak, dependent and incapable. Refugee crisis, here they blame US for refugee crisis in Europe, of course, and sanctions. Here they say that sanctions are harmful only for Europeans. For Russians, they are good because they can stimulate local producers, but French farmers, for example, are suffering. Then we go to Ukraine. Ukraine is not independent country, of course, for Russians. It's kind of puppet of America, and the main narratives are civil war, failed state, Russian Federation helps Donbass, so it means that Ukraine doesn't care and only Russia can help Donbass people. Russophobia, of course, they present us as fascists. They are showing how we are publishing books of Goebbels, or we are burning some Russian flags, and so on. Fascists and radicals destroy Ukraine. And yeah, they usually show very marginalized groups of people as very popular in Ukraine. For example, if we have some parade or march with, of people, some nationalists with torches, they show us like everybody in Ukraine, fascist and nationalist. Ukraine is puppet of West, yes. And top narratives about the US on Russian TV. first one, the US on the world stage. Here they talk mostly about aggressive hegemony of the US and that America is setting some rules for other countries, but is not ready to obey these rules. And the US interfere in life of other countries and impose their understanding of the order. Horrors of life is the same as with Europe. It's very dangerous and insecure. And again, authorities and security services are weak and incapable. Military narrative, I will talk about it in details, but mostly it's about NATO and about coming closer to Russian borders. Internal problems showing that people are not happy inside America, and USA against Russia Federation, it's mostly about Russophobia or anti-Russian hysteria. So narrative one, the US on the world stage. As I said, problems between America and other countries, and USA is developing war in Ukraine, and not only in Ukraine, it supports different conflicts and coups, revolutions all over the world. And wherever US is coming, there is no life there anymore. The US uses Ukraine in geopolitical battle with RF, so again, Ukraine is a puppet, and initiates conflicts overseas and historical scenes, and they very often they refer to World War II. Here we have some quote. The problem with refugees didn't suddenly arise from nowhere. It's just one of the successive stages of the US government's program to destabilize the political situation in the Middle East and the European continent. The goal of the Americans is to put the entire European continent, the European Union, in total dependence on the political will of the USA. I just want to emphasize that this is news. This is not entertainment program. Because it was our goal to focus on key news programs and key talk shows. The rhetoric in entertainment area is much more radical and emotional, and we didn't want to show it here. Horrors of life, natural disasters, 58%, crashes, technogenic catastrophes, disease, epidemics, and so on. Military. USA is the main aggressive power in the world. So generally, Russian media present America as real equal enemy. Of course, Europe is kind of puppet too, but real enemy is the US. US have a nuclear weapon, and you have like historical problems with Russians, and there are also these distinct. There are a lot of difficult, not difficult. There's distinguishes between description of instability, for example, in Europe and America. Like if Europe just simply unstable, then America wants to impose this instability over the world. USA that has weak army and problems with allies. Talking about army, they very often they show American army as not strong. They're trying to ridicule it, and one of the very popular topic on it is LGBT among the military. Like, look at them. How can we afraid them if they have so many gays in their army, for example, or gender issue? Then USA can't finish the war in Syria without Russian Federation. It was also a very popular topic in 2016. And NATO, which equals USA, is preparing to attack Russia. So this topics, this thesis that NATO is coming closer and closer to Russian borders, you can hear almost in each Russian program. Like NATO is fighting in Ukraine, NATO is fighting in Syria, NATO was fighting in Georgia, and so on. Quotes. This is actually a very good picture. It's written personally for Obama. Europe is in hostage of nuclear adventures of the USA. 5 NATO states will receive new tactical nuclear weapons with smart electronics from Washington in the coming years. They will be received in return for the old weapons that have been stored since the Cold War. Experts say Americans again jeopardize world security and want to solve their problems at someone else's expense. Meanwhile, ordinary Europeans are protesting. It's also in use. And internal problems of the USA, racism, police scandals, criminal and domestic violence, political protests, economic problems, and sexual scandals. The US against Russia, a lot of stories about Russophobia. They actually say that Anglo-Saxons, right? Anglo-Saxon, they call you like this, hates Russians, so you're like together with British people usually, and yeah, we have even specific video for United Kingdom, and they very often they use this wording, Anglo-Saxons. USA implies illegal sanctions against Russia. The sanctions are damaging to the whole world economy, violations of right of Russians in the US. US can't rule the world without Russia and is oppressing free Russian media. Here we have a quote of Russian academician and acting advisor to President Putin, and he's also very active and popular participant of Russian talk shows. The USA has waging a war against Russia for a long time. The aim of this war is the same as in 1941, 1945, to destroy Russia as a country and Russian people as a nation. This is done so that nothing remains of Russia in history. This is the point of American aggression. And this is one of the favorite writers of Putin. He's very famous, and here is his quotation. The United States has taken the course of destroying Russia, and it is unchanged. A good Indian is a dead Indian, they say. Do not think that this saying is only about the Indians. Yeah, he sells like great amount of books all the time. And narratives about NATO, as I said, Russia could cooperate with Europe if without the US. So the main power in NATO is United States. And NATO countries are the vassals of the United States, and they have lost their sovereignty and are under external control or occupation. NATO in the geopolitical game seeks Russia's death and kills Russian people in Donbass. And actually this particular narrative is very popular even among Ukrainians, especially in eastern Ukraine. People who consume Russian television, they believe that NATO soldiers really are present in Ukraine and fighting against Russia. Here we have some quotes. We all are dreaming of visiting the ruins of the Pentagon with the red flag. This is Vladimir Solovyov, very popular guy, and he even got some medal from Mr. Putin. And it's actually interesting thing that a lot of people on Russian television, even people from entertainment programs like Alexander Maslyakov, he has some humor program on one of the main channel, he also got medals, but not only from Putin, and also from Ministry of Defense. Americans plan to kill Erdogan. Here we have some, I don't know whether you understand this Russian. Yeah, so it was difficult to translate, but these are bad words. And it was very popular during Obama's presidency, and you could buy the sticker wherever you want. You know, almost in each shop they were selling this sticker Obama Chmo. Chmo is like bad, very bad person, and yeah, and it was like a whole, you know, it's flash mob, you know, showing your support to the president and showing your attitude to United States. Here we have burning the dollar sign during the religious Orthodox holidays of Maslenitsa, but and also very often they burn, how to say, scarecrow of Obama. It was very popular in Russia somehow last years, and what is more interesting that Russian media is covering these events. And this guy, Mikhail Zadornov, he built his entire career on meme Stupid Americans. It was significantly popular, his shows, and he died last year. Yeah, last year. He also said that MH17 fell because it was heavier than air, and people were laughing. It was very outrageous for Europeans and for Ukrainians, but for Russians it was okay. And but also we know that American embassy didn't give him visa after all these jokes. And here is Russian response for sanctions. Almost every shops, shopping malls were trying to show their attitude, and were putting these stickers that entry for Obama is prohibited. And here we have threats, and Oleksiy will tell more about them. Yeah.
So why do we think it's important? Because one could say that, okay, this is for their domestic audience, why should we care? We think you should care because they're putting great resources in order to convince their population, domestic population, never to accept Western liberal values. Also, they're preparing, from this we can say that they're preparing their domestic population for a potential conflict with the West. And they are portraying liberal values as toxic values, and thus they say that they have almost a duty to protect themselves from these values and to bring order in Europe. Often there are comparisons with the Second World War, that the same as they did during the Second World War, they brought order in Europe and they won the war. They can repeat it again. But we see that their narratives are powerful not only inside Russia, they are powerful even outside Russia. They have influence on such trusted organizations as BBC. So, for example, a recent killing of Mr. Zakharchenko, and you can see the chart how it was, how this news was given on BBC. And in red, we marked how we believe it should be really given on BBC. So it's not a Ukrainian crisis; it's Russian-Ukrainian war. Mr. Zakharchenko is not a rebel; he's definitely a Kremlin puppet or a regime leader, at least. But still, BBC is following narratives which are heavily promoted by Russians. Also, there should be no doubts that Russian TV is just another arm of their secret services. Just two examples. For example, this first page with a man in glasses. As you probably have heard that a prominent figure of Russian opposition, Mr. Nemtsov, was killed 2 or 3 years ago. He was killed just 300 meters from the Kremlin. This was a very good operation because all this area is covered with cameras, of course. And so there was a moment for 5 seconds when a big car was passing by Nemtsov, hiding from camera, and he was shot during these 5 seconds. So on the first picture, this guy, he's driver of this car, and he is giving evidences that how it happened, that I was just driving, I haven't seen anything. I don't know how it happened. A few years later, we saw same guy, but he's now already a farmer and participating in online conference with Putin and asking Putin that could we not remove sanctions, please, because they're so good for us farmers. The second picture is a woman who is participating in different pro-Kremlin events in different countries. So it's Latvia, Ukraine, Russia. So their media, their TV, it is so-called media. It is really another arm of their secret services, and we in Ukraine had a lot of discussions, difficult discussions with different monitoring organizations which monitor freedom of speech. Because when we banned some of Russian media, and we had to ban them because we know that they're operating in favor of their secret services, monitoring organization, they say that we are breaking freedom of speech. We say, come on, wait a minute, they're not media, so we're not breaking freedom of speech. But it is an ongoing debate with such organizations. What is Russian Kremlin's reply to all this? It's anti-Russia hysteria and Russophobia. You can see these charts. They show how often these terms were used by their foreign ministry on Sputnik and Russia Today. Significant increase in the last 2 years. Russian news program, they dehumanize an average Westerner. So he or she is depicted as strange, depraved, unfair. And so therefore they have a right to what I said, bring order to this toxic land of Western values. Also, they say, like this quote by Mr. Kiselov, who is a very important guy in Russian disinformation. He's not only a host of a Sunday show on the First Channel, but he's also head of the biggest informational agency. They say that there is no neutral journalism anymore, and we're doing just the same what is done by BBC, CNN, so it's okay. It's okay that we're giving you already formed opinions. So just to remember just few things from all what we have said today, the first thing would be that we strongly believe that mindset of peaceful cooperation is perceived by the Kremlin as an opportunity to attack. They're putting enormous resources to portray the West, but in particular the United States and NATO as their ultimate enemy. And of course, media is just part of their hybrid warfare. It is supported by their financial, business, and cultural ties with the West, which is especially a big problem for European countries. Thank you, and we would be glad to take your questions.